Hi, my name's Beth and I'm a student at the University of Oxford studying history and English in my first year. And here is my completely up-to-date and honest review of how it's going so far. So these are the topics I'll be covering in today's video. So if you want to jump ahead to whatever interests you the most, there you go. And let's get started. First up, given it's a uni, I'm going to be talking about the teaching. So I'm going to cover tutorials, the workload, organisation, contact time, and lectures as well. So the tutorial system means that every week you have a 1-to-1 or 1-to-3 meeting with your tutor to discuss the topic and learn about it in more detail and go over your essays. So you can receive some really detailed, good feedback from those. I've really enjoyed my tutorials. Most of them have been 2-to-1s, but I've had a few 1-to-1s, which honestly weren't anywhere near as scary as I expected them to be. And I've learned so much from the tutorials because you get really in-depth feedback on what you've done, and I find it really helped me improve my writing. On to lectures. Lectures have, for the most part, been really good, but I've definitely used a lot of discretion in choosing which I go to. So for history in my first term, I had 2 lectures per week, and they were super relevant. I went to almost all of them, and honestly, I wish there'd been more because 2 is not very much. But for English this term, there were a lot. There were about 15. I used a lot of discretion in choosing which I went to because lots were on authors I wasn't studying, so weren't the most useful for me. And time was too tight to be able to make it to all of the lectures every week. And that brings me on to organisation. Because Oxford want to give a lot of autonomy to their tutors, what you're learning in college, where you have your classes, tutorials, and write your essays, won't necessarily line up with the lectures that the faculty are giving. So you might be studying Virginia Woolf in college and study it in week 2, but you might not have a lecture on it till week 6 or something like that. So you need to go to your lecture later and you won't have those notes for when you're writing your essay. So that does take a lot of impetus from you and discretion to decide what you go to and how useful it's going to be, and just really keeping track of what you're studying and when. And there's lots of lectures on authors that we didn't study, and then some that were really useful as well. I'm on a joint degree, history and English, and there's only actually 8 people in Oxford in my year group on my course, as opposed to I think about 200 on each of history and English single honours, which means that our timetabling isn't always amazing, and it's often left to us to coordinate between our history and English tutors to make sure we can actually go to everything. We're not catered for as well as the single honours because everybody does those, and then there's 8 of us doing the other one. So the organisation for my course specifically isn't amazing, but that's not reflective of everybody's experience on the single honours course. Moving on to the workload. The workload is okay. It is intense though, and it will keep you busy, especially if you want to do extracurriculars, which a lot of people do. Not everybody does, but most people do a lot of extracurriculars. Having said that, it shouldn't take up every waking moment, and they do recommend that you treat it like a full-time job, so kind of 40 hours a week. I think I definitely did more than that in my first term, but then in my second term, I did a bit less than that. And I've got friends who do way more and friends who do way less. It hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows. They do throw you in the deep end. It is a challenge, and there have been lots of weeks where I've struggled to make my deadlines. It's hard to catch up on work if you fall behind because it just keeps coming. It's kind of relentless. One thing that surprised me and frustrates me a little bit is the amount of contact time compared to the amount of solitary reading. Last term for English, I got maybe 3 to 4 hours of contact time. So when the contact time happens, it's really great. However, compared to sixth form, where I would have classes every day, then it's a lot more independent learning, which I appreciate, and I appreciate all the skills that I'm developing from learning all this stuff by myself rather than being taught it by a teacher directly. However, there is a huge amount of reading that you're expected to just do by yourself, which feels very introverted compared to sixth form, which felt a lot more social. And I'd really be interested to know how that compares to other unis and the amount of contact time you get there. So do comment below if you have any thoughts on that. To accommodation, all the freshers live in college, so that means we get a room for the 9 weeks of term that is furnished for us, but we do have to move all our personal possessions into and out of our room every 9 weeks. You get storage if you're an international student, but for those of us in the UK, sadly not. So that is a faff every term, but yeah, it has to be done. My room has a lovely view of the back quad, which is gorgeous, and it's a good size with a bed, a desk, sink, drawers, a wardrobe, and an armchair. So it's very comfortable. It's not those amazing suites that you see in the room tours at Magdalen College on Instagram, but it's a very nice room. And we have access to a small kitchenette where I make my breakfasts and lunches. And then I also have dinner in hall 5 nights a week because we have a meal plan. So it works out at about £2.50 per meal, which I think is a really good price for what you get. And I know other colleges are a little bit more expensive, but even so, eating in hall saves a lot of time and a lot of cooking. And it just means that you're getting lots of vegetables every day. So I really appreciate hall being there for us. Oxford itself is a beautiful city to study in, and we're really lucky with the number of resources we have there. The libraries are amazing, and then there's museums, there's the Ashmolean. So we had a class there looking at modernist art, and the curator showed us lots of sketches from the storage. And then we've also looked at manuscripts of first editions of Virginia Woolf's works from her own printing press. So there are these really good opportunities to just see some really cool stuff. And then in Oxford, there's also some lovely cafes. There's an amazing covered market, and there are so many different student societies to get involved in. So there's no excuse to be bored, and there is plenty going on as well. My fellow students are really lovely too. I've made some great friends, and apart from being very academic and a little bit nerdy, everyone is actually surprisingly normal. It's what you would expect. It's not really super privileged, highly educated people all the time. There's such a mixture, and you do meet the occasional person who is very obviously from a very privileged background, but that's definitely the exception rather than the rule. I've mentioned a few extracurriculars already, but honestly, the environment there is so rich for them. There is so much going on. You won't have time for all of it. You'll have to be a little bit selective. We all do more than we should, but it's so much fun and there are so many opportunities. In my first term, I wrote for a student newspaper. I did lots of events with the Christian Union. I learnt to tango. I made some outreach resources for the English faculty, and I also went to talks on media and journalism, which there were so many good resources for. And this term, I have mostly focused on running a college cafe. It's a committee position that I got, and it's been really fun, but been so much work, honestly, so much work. Don't run your student cafes. Well, do, because it's fun, but it will take over your life. Anyways, aside from that, I've also been to a few talks. I've learned how to do Scottish dancing. I played a couple of roles in a musical, and I've kept up with my church as well. So it's been another busy term, but a nice balance of lots of things to do. And I think it's good to have some extracurriculars as a way to just switch off from all the academic stuff that's going on and just schedule in some time doing something different, because when it's so intense with the workload, you've got to have things that are different, use a different part of your brain. Anyway, I think that has covered most of my uni experience so far. So I hope you found that useful, and if you've got any questions or anything you want me to go into more detail about, then do comment down below and I will do my best to get back to you. And if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe for more on uni, Oxford, being a student, books, history, baking. It will be coming soon. So see you soon.